on Twitter the latest piece from Michael Silverman, Sam Kennedy speaking out and making all sorts of declarations about what the team intends to do and how they're willing to go into the CBT, how they're going after Soto, how they're looking for pitching, all of that stuff. Why should we believe them this time around?
Well, I'll preface it by saying they've lost benefit of the doubt. Like that's, you don't have the benefit of the doubt. But I do think that we can go by. I'll tell you how I feel, and then this goes back to sort of the tweet I had a couple of weeks ago, which is I do feel like their intent is different than any other time, certainly since the Dombrowski left. And we forget, the intent of the Red Sox used to be something dramatically different underneath this ownership group. All you have to do is go back and look at the 2004 Netflix documentary, and you see an ownership group were saying, we'll do whatever it takes. Schilling and Falk and A-Rod and everything. And then you're looking at it, this is the same ownership group? Are you kidding me? And then next thing you know, this offseason comes around, and you're starting to hear things different. And I'm not talking about publicly. I'm talking about behind the scenes. The Soto thing was out of nowhere. I mean, I was at the GM meetings, and I jokingly asked Breslow up in the suite when we had like four of the writers there, oh, yeah, you're going to go after Soto, right? And his response was sort of like he didn't laugh, which was sort of struck me as like I was joking. And then next thing you know, yes, they are going after Soto. So my biggest thing is, yes, you've lost benefit of the doubt, so prove it to me. But I will say this. The feeling I have behind the scenes and for what they've also said is that their intent is something that we haven't seen in a long time.
So that intent is good. I love it. I'm with you. I've been trying to sway my partner every day for months now that this feels different, that Cora felt different at the end of the year, the whole thing. But how do you envision this playing out? Because Soto is obviously sort of a one-of-one, $600 million, elite player, the whole thing. Is that legitimately their plan of attack, or do you see something that could be more fulfilling in terms of 2 or 3 like $200 million contracts where you get a big bat and a couple starting pitchers?
See, I think Soto's a different bucket, right? I think I know that it all falls under the you have the total payroll and the luxury tax threshold and everything else. But listen, once you go past it, you go past it. I think either you accept that you're going to take the penalties or you don't. And anybody, I think, that wants to truly compete accepts that you take the penalties. So what? You get moved back 10 spots in the draft or whatever. It's about winning World Series, and that's what we can't lose sight of. So I think this Soto thing is almost from a different bucket, where we know that this is going to be at a level that is unprecedented, that we'll never have to go through again. But I still think it's, in terms of priorities for this team, it's 1A and 1B. It's, you have the Soto thing, that's fine. But it doesn't change that they're still going to probably get a top-of-the-rotation guy, because that is the priority. So, in other words, if they sign Soto, it's not like all of a sudden you're going to get Wade Miley. No, you're still going after the Corbin Burns and the Blake Snells and the Garrett Crochets and those guys. Maybe how you get them is different, but you're still going to go after them. And, so whether or not you get Juan Soto, that is a priority, and maybe the priority, which is getting that guy, and then you go from there.
Well, coming into last season, there was a lot of holes in the rotation. I know they signed Giolito, Bradford, but I don't think any of us were super enthused about that one. But there was Snell, there was Montgomery, who admittedly didn't have a good season, but there were other options out there at starting pitcher, and they didn't even seem to be interested in any of those. Like, I don't remember, and this is for the Red Sox, the interest kings. You barely heard anything about them with Snell or a lot of these guys. I know with Montgomery, it progressed a little bit, but that didn't end up going anywhere. And I think that it's just hard for me to wrap my mind around the idea that this year, now suddenly, after adding 3 wins to the previous 2 seasons, now all of a sudden everybody's got their wallets out and ready to make these big moves. Also, it's not so much about them being willing to do it; it's about them being willing to outbid all these other teams who are into it. And why? I guess the question is, why do you now suddenly believe that they'll have the gumption to go out and outbid the Cohens and the Steinbrenners and the Dodgers of the world? Why is that now suddenly something you think can happen?
Man, there's a lot to pick through, but it's all good stuff, right? I mean, I think it is.
He was rambling.
That was a little bit. Yeah.
No, but
that was like a wiggy
You're
question.
fired up.
Absolutely.
But isn't this what you want? You don't want apathy. Like you want, like why is this happening? What was the cause of this? Should we look at this different? And I do think that there was a reverse course. Like last year, when I look at last year's offseason, the biggest tell for last year's offseason was the Financial Times article from John Henry. We have a 20-1 or 30-1 chance, which was I hated that. I hated it because you know how you change the odds? It isn't like you're getting the cards and you can't change the cards. You invest more and you change the odds. That's how it works. Look at the Dodgers. So anyway, I just think that that's how ownership viewed it, and that's how they viewed it going back to when they hired Chaim Bloom. They said, we see how the Tampas are going to do it. This is the way that baseball is going to do it, so forth and so on. And that's the way they've done it. Now, this is a course correction. What we also have to follow when it comes to this ownership group is that they are big in course corrections. They're, hey, you missed on Abreu, the Cuban player. We're going to get Rusney Castillo. Oh, we lost John Lester. We're going to pay $40 million more than anyone else for Price, and then trade for Chris Sale. All along the way, they are big into course correction, and we were waiting for that course correction. It took them forever. I think what we're seeing now is just another course correction where they said, okay, we understand in order to compete not only on the field but business-wise that you have to go on the model of the Dodgers and the Phillies and the Yankees and those sort of teams because that's the way baseball's going. There's just no room for interpretation, so we're willing to do it. We have enough money. You know that they have enough money, so we're willing to do that. And that's where I think, again, this is what you answer, well, why should we believe it? Why are they doing this? We've seen this about face a million times in different ways. And I just feel like this is another case of it. And I do believe it because I do believe when Craig Breslow says, this is what I'm being told from ownership, the word decisive. I love when he uses the word. We have to be more decisive. That's another thing that was important. Alex Cora going out to Los Angeles, I don't think he goes out there unless he actually feels like they actually had a chance at Soto. So all of this falls under the big, like what I said before, which is I just feel like they have this course correction. It's just a dramatic one more than ever, but still it falls in line with what they've done in the past.
John Dennis, two-part question for me. First, do we thank the Yankees and Dodgers and this postseason in part for this course correction? Did we see teams that really spend a lot of money and have MVP caliber players tend to play later in the season? And do you have an idea for timeline? Because that's been a big criticism of the offseason for all of Major League Baseball in recent years, the way things have sort of been ruined by things dragging out. Could we see a more expedited hot stove baseball this offseason?
Yeah, so the first question is, I think that it's half and half, where it's like I said before, when they hired Chaim Bloom, it was look at Tampa, how's Tampa doing, and there was other teams. We don't have to spend as much to win, and they were falling in love with that. Now we see, to your point, stars and bigger payrolls. They are absolutely winning, not only winning on the field, but winning business wise too. But I do think it's one of these things where they have to basically figure out what they're going to do in terms of if they're going to go after a Soto, and if they're actually going to say we are going to be all in. Absolutely, this is the path that we're going to go, and we are going to go. Because guys, they would win, and I've said this before, they would win every free agent battle they had. Mark Teixeira and John Lester. That's the only one they didn't win. They didn't win, and then Dave Dombrowski left, and next thing you know, you're complaining about Zach Eflin, taking the same deal with Tampa Bay. What happened to that? So what was the second part again? Tell me the second part.
The timeline for the offseason. Do you think we could get some action?
The timeline for the offseason is this stinks. The baseball offseason is awful. It stinks. It's the lockout was the best offseason of all time because you had deadlines.
Yep.
I do think the one that everyone's waiting for is Soto. And I do think that Soto is going to be done. I feel by the time people leave the winter meetings, it will have been done. That's how I feel, where you have these meetings. And by the way, the meetings, I don't get too caught up in the meetings because John Lester's meeting for the Red Sox was a scrapbook. and obviously they didn't win, so maybe it wasn't a good idea. But still, it was the meetings are you have to buy in to get in the meetings. That's what those meetings are showing, that you are doing the buy-in to get at the table. It's going to come down to money, but I do think that the Red Sox have more of a compelling argument than I think a lot of people are letting on, for the sole reason is that they can walk in there and say, you, Juan Soto, are our next David Ortiz. You are the guy who is going to, for the next 10, 12, whatever year, is going to be the centerpiece guy, much like Ortiz, the guy who is your hero, the guy who's hanging out with you in the Dominican Republic because they live in the same complex. So, yes, that is a compelling thing. Still, it'll come down to money, and if Steve Cohen wants to be Steve Cohen, then the Mets are going to win.
All right, one more question here, Bradford. You mentioned things that were brought up in the meeting. One of them was Soto and his people wanting to know about player evaluation, the prospect pipeline, and all of that, something the Red Sox certainly have over a team like the Yankees. They have a much better minor league system than the Yankees and than most teams in the majors. The prospects right now, considering the fact that you brought up Crochet and some of these other potential trades that could be made, how deep into the prospect bag are they willing to go to facilitate some of these things? And could that potentially affect Soto or somebody else who's going to sign a 10-year contract? Could that affect their view of the Red Sox as a potential landing spot?
No, the answer is, I don't think it impacts it. I would be very surprised if you look at the top four, if all top four are still with the Red Sox heading into spring training. I think they're going to deal off one of those, or if you wanted to say, hey, you're going to deal off Willie Abreu instead of Roman Anthony, then so be it. But one of these guys are going, if not a couple of these guys. I think they understand they have some duplication. They understand they have some value. And they understand that you aren't going to, if you're going to take this approach, you aren't going to get to where you want to go if you just keep hanging on to all these guys. You have to pick the right guys, but I think they're willing to trade off some of these guys. And in terms of how Juan Soto views it, no, because beyond the top four, whoever you trade, you still have a really good farm system. At least that's the perception in baseball. And for Juan Soto, another part of this is, you are trading one of the main guys, but still, you're showing that you want to win. I mean, that has to be the other part about this. And I do think it comes back to the case that the Red Sox can present, is that that's another feather in their cap. I got to imagine that was one of the drums they were banging on pretty hard when they met with Juan Soto, as I look at what we are, look at our rankings, so forth and so on. So I still put it at 20%, but still the fact that we're talking about it, the fact that we can get jacked up about it, it's a refreshing change.
All right, 20%. You heard it here first.